All right. Welcome back to the next episode of Dharma Talk. Once again, we are covering The Heart of the Buddhist Teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh. We are on Chapter 7, Touching Our Suffering. This is a continuation on the section on the Four Noble Truths. To begin, in the Pali version of Discourse on Turning of the Wheel of the Dharma, the Buddha told the 5 monks, as long as the insight and understanding of the Four Noble Truths in their 3 stages and 12 aspects, just as they are, had not fully realized, I could not say that in this world, with its gods, maras, brahmins, recluses, brahmans, and men, someone had realized the highest awakening. Monks, as soon as the insight and understanding of the Four Noble Truths in their 3 stages and 12 aspects, just as they are, had been realized, I would say that in this world with its gods, maras, brahmas, recluses, brahmans, and men, some had realized the highest awakening. In the Chinese version of the sutra, the Buddha said, monks, the experience of the 3 turning of the wheel with regard to each of the 4 truths gives rise to eyes of awakening understanding, and therefore I declare before gods, spirits, Shrammanas and Brahmins of all times that I have destroyed all afflictions and reached full awakening. Yeah, so that comes off as quite different. A lot of meaning there, I feel like, is not conveyed properly. I'm curious to see what Thich Nhat Hanh has to say about that. The wheel of the Dharma was put in motion 12 times. 3 for each of the Four Noble Truths. To understand the Four Noble Truths, not just intellectually, but experientially, we have to practice the 12 turnings of the wheel. The first turning is called recognition. We sense that something is wrong, but we are not able to say exactly what it is. We make some effort to escape, but we cannot. We try to deny our suffering, but it persists. The Buddha said that to suffer and not know that we are suffering is more painful than the burden endured by a mule carrying an unimaginable heavy load. We must, first of all, recognize that we are suffering and then determine whether its basis is physical, psychological, physiological. Our suffering needs to be identified. So, this passage so far has started pretty vague, pretty ambiguous, but I do feel like there is certainly an importance to this idea of recognition. It kind of goes into that situation to where, like, if you don't know you have a problem, it's really hard to fix the problem. And when you get into topics of, like, ignorance is bliss, yeah, I feel like that's true, to where a lot of people go about their lives having bad things happening to them, having suffering occur, and have bad things occur, but not really have the means or the wherewithal to really recognize how much it is truly affecting them and how much agency they actually have over that matter. They'll find different people to blame, they'll find different causes, but they won't look inward. They won't address the core fundamental issues. Recognizing and identifying our suffering is like the work of a doctor diagnosing an illness. He or she says, if I press here, does it hurt? And we say, yes, this is my suffering. This has come to be. The wounds in our heart became the object of our meditation. We show them to our doctor and we show them to the Buddha, which means we show them to ourselves. Our suffering is us, and we need to treat it with kindness and nonviolence. We need to embrace our fear, hatred, anguish, and anger. My dear suffering, I know you are there. I am here for you, and I will take care of you. We stop running from our pain. With all our courage and tenderness, we recognize, acknowledge, and identify it. So this is another interesting insight. A pretty common piece of discourse in pretty much all branches and all traditions of Buddhism is the way that it treats emotions. A lot of people on the outside may think that Buddhism is about, like, foregoing emotion, ignoring it, things like that. When in reality, the core way that you're supposed to tend to emotion is recognizing that it is present, acknowledging it, and allowing it to pass through you as quickly as it entered you. So rather than saying to yourself, I'm feeling angry or I am angry, more view it as the sensation or the emotions of anger is arising within me. Suggesting that it's not fundamental about yourself. It is based on conditions that have occurred, and you are reflecting those conditions And then depending on how you interact with those emotions, depending on how much you internalize it or recognize them as being fleeting, allows you to proceed forward with said emotions, be it conquering them, be it allowing them to exist, or letting them take hold of you completely. The second turning of the wheel is called encouragement. After recognizing and identifying our pain, we take the time to look deeply into it in order to understand its true nature, which means its causes. After observing our symptoms, the doctor says, "I will look deeply into it. This illness can be understood." It may take him a week to conduct tests and inquire about what we have been eating, our attitudes, how we spend our time, and so on, but he is determined to understand our illness. Our suffering, depression, illness, a difficult relationship, or fear needs to be understood like a doctor. We are determined to understand it. We practice sitting and walking meditation, and we ask for guidance and support from our friends and, if we have one, our teacher. As we do this, we see that the causes of our suffering are knowable, and we make every effort to get to the bottom of it. At this stage of our practice, we can still be set back. And so then, in the middle of this passage, it shows a sort of diagram of the 12 turnings of the wheel. We'll come back to that once we've covered the rest in it. So for those of you in the call, do you have any comments that you'd like to share or questions so far?
So, like, when it comes to guilt specifically, so like guilt is like something a lot of people suffer from.
Yes.
Do they describe that as more of like a simple thing or like a multi-layered thing?
So I suppose that kind of, as we know, as I've spoken before, and on some of the previous coverings that we've had in conversation, everything has codependent origination. So guilt is not able to exist in and of itself on its own. It must have other factors that build into it. And because there are multiple factors that build into it, the way of which you feel guilt, process guilt, and then treat guilt also must be understood to require different means to treat it. So I guess the follow-up of that being, what kind of guilt are you referring to?
I'm more just asking because I'm curious. I'm not really feeling particularly guilty about anything at the moment. For past mistakes, we could.
Okay.
I mean, that's just the definition of guilt, I guess. But
yeah, so in that sense, guilt is kind of a multifaceted emotion because it ties into like, things having been in the past, things that cannot be remedied you might be able to make up for something bad that you've done in the past, but that thing has occurred. It is over. You cannot go back and change that. And so the way that guilt affects us can have a myriad of emotions associated with it, be it sorrow, hatred, resent, some lingering ego aspect that causes you to feel guilty about something. And so as far as how one would treat the sensations of guilt, I believe it would be more important to treat the basis of which brought you to the conditions of which you are guilty feeling to begin with. Okay? So acknowledging that this guilt that you feel is an emotion, it is brought upon by a variety of factors. I would begin looking into what those factors might be, and acknowledging that they too are impermanent, and that they too are causal from other things. It's very case specific on this one. All right, what about guilt for doing things not approved for society that doesn't harm anyone? Yeah, so Buddhism takes a very strong harm reductionist perspective in general. However, you can still harm oneself. The thing with Buddhism is it does not necessarily have sins or things that it condemns you for or whatnot. Actions, beliefs, and anything that is formed based on actions and beliefs are categorized into two sections: skillful or unskillful. Okay, skillful being something that actually allows you to alleviate suffering, allows you to progress in your journey. Unskillful being things that are holding you back. So, society is fundamentally a social construct. A social construct that could only occur if we did not have these fundamental bases for how one would even begin to shape a society. That is a value judgment. Somebody made that choice for you. We are simply living in it. So with that in mind, Buddhism typically takes a stance that like society is ephemeral. It is fundamentally irrelevant. If it does not bring about additional suffering to yourself and other, whether or not it is accepted by society is irrelevant. I think a good example of this from a Buddhist framework would be something like gay marriage or homosexual relationships. Obviously, in a lot of Western society that is, oriented based on the Abrahamic religions. So we're talking Christianity, Islam, Judaism. Homosexuality is generally understood to be immoral. And its reasons for immoral are very vague. It's not as well thought out as a lot of specifically Christians like to think it is. Buddhism really doesn't care that much about it. Being gay is, to a Buddhist perspective, no more or less legitimate than being straight. It is irrelevant. The question is your relationship or your homosexual relationship unhealthy? Is it drawing too much into what is referred to as sexual misconduct? Things like extensive lust, things like that. Okay, and so from that sense, the Buddhist framework just straight up doesn't give a shit. It does not care. If it's not harming yourself in any meaningful way, if it's not harming others in any meaningful way, it is irrelevant. All right, sorry if it's TMI, but in my case, it's psychedelics use. I have a lot of people look at me as a druggie if I open up, yet I still use it for emotional healing. Still, it is disapproved by my family, so it causes them suffering while liberating me. So the thing is, just because it is giving them, just because my argument there would be your use of psychedelics is not giving them suffering. It is their perception around the danger or the usage of the psychedelics that is giving them suffering. They are causing themselves to suffer. Your actions in this case are fundamentally not attached to the root cause. It's irrelevant. Most of it is from like a misinformation thing. So the key thing with there being, is your psychedelic use skillful or unskillful? Are you using it for emotional healing? Are you using it for becoming more attuned with yourself and with your community? Are you using it to lessen the harm of those around you, yourself included? If so, then as far as I'm concerned, that's a skillful usage. But if you're using it to escape, if you're using it to forget, if you're doing reckless shit, like the guy who was talking about how he was driving on the 2 Wicket tablets in the Reddit. Oh yeah, forgot to say, YouTube, any discussion of these substances is based on the principles of education and harm reduction. Please don't strike me, don't strike me. I hate how I always have to say it. I feel like a broken record, but your AI is trash. So in your specific case, I don't know you. I don't know the specifics. I can't talk about that. I can only give what you are conveying. But from the way you are describing it and the way that I know from others I've interacted with, much of the harm, much of the suffering they are bringing on themselves. It is a fundamental misunderstanding. Similar, I would honestly say, similar to like a Christian parent who is deeply distraught by finding out that their child is gay or trans. The child being gay or trans is irrelevant to their suffering. They are causing themselves to suffer by their judgment. Does that kind of elucidate things? I know that was a fair bit, but the stuff is complicated. Okay, so that did answer what you're looking for. I'm glad. Buddhism has a very troubled relationship with substances, because it simultaneously holds that, typically you want to avoid them because it is working under the assumption that you are a fundamentally unskillful person. And so you're not going to advise an unskillful person use a substance that many can use unskillfully because it can bring about harm. That's why typically it is not recommended that you're even involved in the trade or anything of these types of products, anything, especially alcohol. Alcohol in particular is regarded as one of the most unskillful substances, where any realization that can be provided from it is so minuscule compared to that of the harms of it. But this this idea of like sobriety is being a must is in and of itself an attachment. The belief that oneself is consistent and pure by being sober is an illusion. We are constantly changing by what we put into our body. We are constantly changing by that of who we interact with. If you are lonely, it will affect you mentally. If you are too busy all the time and have too many people constantly like crowding you, it'll affect you mentally. As far as I'm concerned, that is changing your mental state. You cease being sober for whatever that means. It's multifaceted. But if you are looking at it from an understanding of we are not one consistent thing, we are ever changing, and we are built from all of our influences, and you do your best to use the influences that you are knowingly putting into your body for skillful means as opposed to recklessness, selfishness, greed, things like that, then I don't see a problem with it. That's my belief. There are certainly some Buddhists who would contest that, but a lot of those same Buddhists are stuck in a deep dogmatic pit that I feel is also in contrary to Shakyamuni's teachings. Any other follow-ups on that one?
Shakyamuni is another name for the Buddha.
Oh, yeah, my mistake. Yeah, so Shakyamuni is, it's in Mahayana, because there are more than one Buddha that is acknowledged as being a great teacher. Often Siddhartha Gautama, the one that most people consider Buddha, is typically referred to as Shakyamuni, or a couple other different names, signifying him as special. Shakya is his clan. Muni means sage, so sage of the Shakya clan. Another common term that's almost always referred to just him is the thus come one, Tathagata. That often is only also referred to Shakyamuni also. That's one of those, like, I'm so used to discourse only in these like academic settings, or in these, like, in some cases, like theocratic settings, that I'll slip up there. So if you ever have confusions on words, make sure you ask. I sometimes forget the audience. It's tricky. This stuff is really challenging. There's lots of different names. Siddhartha Gautama in and of itself has like 20 different honorific titles, All right, let's see. I agree, and from the Buddhist state, there are a lot of promises and pitfalls to psychs. Things like the paranoia brought up by the controlled substance laws can inhibit practice, etc., lead to incarnation. Yeah, I believe there is kind of like a self-fulfilling aspect to it as well. And you can almost tie it into the guilt thing. Like, if you were raised your entire life thinking, like, you were stuck watching dare courses or dumb shit like that, even if the substance and the way that you're using it is not... Oh, incarceration. I thought you meant incarnation as in, like, rebirth. Yeah, incarceration certainly complicates it. Ugh. Paranoia brought up... Okay. So this is why I feel like this temporary little loophole thing that we got going on with the mystery magic mushrooms is, once again, YouTube, harm reduction education. These are not controlled substances. Because they are not legally explicitly, a problem, it's one of those, like, it is a lot harder to get you on this stuff than you would think, but it's not as hard as a lot of people wish it would be. So I would still play it cautiously. At least there is a great benefit to tryptamine psychedelics, and that is it exits your system incredibly quickly and is almost impossible to test for unless you are specifically looking for it. And in some places, like... In some places, it's one of those, like, you can't be charged for being under the influence. You can only be charged for the possession. And if the product is, like, in the freaking bag, again, like, this stuff is being sold all around America. You can have it be shipped to you from many stores online. I would only worry about possessing, like, the actual controlled substances. I would advise against that simply because at this stage it's not necessary. It'll do most of the same things for you. Ugh, I really hope YouTube doesn't flag this one. They're so bad about this. Zero, did you have anything else you wanted to add? I feel like you were saying something.
Nah.
Okay. I'll proceed onward. Still, after we have successfully diagnosed our ailment, for a time we continue to create suffering for ourselves. We pour gasoline on the fire through our words, thoughts, and deeds, and often don't realize it. The first turning of the wheel of the second noble truth is recognition. I am continuing to create suffering. The Buddha said, when something has come to be, we have to acknowledge its presence and look deeply into its nature. When we look deeply, we discover that the kinds of nutriments that have helped it come to be and that continue to feed it. He then elaborated 4 kinds of nutrients that can lead to our happiness or our suffering: edible food, sense impressions, intention, and consciousness. So this gets into an interesting one, and this kind of ties back on to like, well, what is the situation with the use of substances, specifically psychedelics. In Buddhist framework, everything is in some way an attachment or a craving. The goal is the cessation of all of them. So based on what your current ailment is, it may be advised that you engage in an attachment in one way to eliminate a worse attachment in another way. Consider it this way. Say you broke your leg and the doctors prescribe you opiate medication. Is opiate medication a problem on its own? Sure, potentially. But if that's what's necessary to get you from not completely being incapacitated for pain for a time, then I feel like that trade-off is a worthy trade-off of attachments. You temporarily gain an attachment for the need for these medications, but it relinquished the attachment to that amount of pain, that inability, the insecurity that comes from being in that kind of pain. That may be worth it to you. So perhaps it's necessary that you get attached to one substance in order to end your attachment to depression, to anxiety, to fears, and insecurities. It's hard to assess how well that trade-off may work for you. But it is not something that I can say outright is not worthy of consideration. It would be foolish to do so. The first nutriment is edible food. What we eat or drink can bring about mental or physical suffering. We must be able to distinguish between what is healthful and what is harmful. We need to practice right view when we shop, cook, and eat. The Buddha offered this example. A young couple and their 2-year-old child were trying to cross the desert and they ran out of food. After deep reflection, the parents realized that in order to survive, they had to kill their son and eat his flesh. Okay. They calculated that if they ate such and such a proportion of their baby's flesh each day and carried the rest on their shoulders to dry, it would last the rest of the journey. But with every morsel of their baby's flesh they ate, the young couple cried and cried. After he told this story, the Buddha asked, "Dear friends, do you think the young man and woman enjoyed eating their son's flesh?" "No, Lord, it would not be possible for them to enjoy eating their son's flesh." The Buddha said, "Yet many people eat the flesh of their parents and their children and their grandchildren and do not know it." So obviously that last part is meant to be more like metaphorical. It gets into that trade-off. Is that survival in this lifetime worth that suffering? Who's to say? It is something worthy of pondering, but it is a complicated matter. These trade-offs can be very risky. Much of our suffering comes from not eating mindfully. We have to learn to eat that preserve the health and well-being of our body and spirit. When we smoke, drink, or consume toxins, we are eating our own lungs, liver, and heart. If we have children and do these things, we are eating our children's flesh. Our children need to be healthy and strong. Yeah, so this is one of those to where we get into like a cultural context situation here. Thich Nhat Hanh comes from Vietnam. Vietnam just fully does not have a culture of substance use outside of tobacco and alcohol for the most part, and tea. And so when he refers to smoking and drinking, obviously he is referring to tobacco and alcohol, which again, any seasoned psychonaut will tell you, like, even in terms of like substance comparisons, both of those are really, really, really bad, even in comparison to other things that are not good. You have to consider the consequences. Whether it may benefit you or not, whether it is skillful or not, you still have to consider that everything you put into your body does have an impact on your status. Being aware of that is of fundamental importance, and recognizing that no matter what it is can cause suffering, can cause craving. We'll pause that one there. Let's see. In the chat, I never fully understood the goal to completely eliminate all desire, though. Desire is just action, action being karma. We as being are action, being is a verb, so we are karma. So if we truly remove all that grounds us to this plane of existence, this vessel would be the time we graduate and move on to the next life. So I feel like there is kind of a sort of cosmological misunderstanding there. Yes, the goal is to fully cease being reborn. The idea that we are trapped within this cycle. But when we say like fully ending desire, fully ending craving, we are talking about a very, very grand multi-lifetime process here. Right, so depending on how you choose to view Buddhism, be it the Buddhist modernist way where it's far more of a philosophy, or from like a very religious aspect, this shit takes lifetimes. Okay? And in more grand Mahayana, like greater vessel understanding, as you relinquish attachments in this life, you will be reborn into realms in which you cease to have physical form. You know, so like the idea of eating just is not a concept. We're talking like multi-dimension theory here. This is some advanced, complicated cosmology that's a little beyond the scope of this one. But yes, the goal is to fundamentally cease all attachment. That is the end state. How that comes about, again, is exceedingly complicated. All right, you say action being karma. So karma as an idea is utilized in several of the religious practices that came from Indian traditions. And so some of them view karma to be very explicitly action, while most Buddhism actually views karma as being far more intentionality. So the same action could have many different intentionalities, and that intentionality dictates your rebirth, rather than the action in and of itself. Practices like Jainism consider karma very explicitly action-based, where intentionality has almost no regard, and it almost has a sort of physical weight property to it. Some versions of the Vedic traditions or Hinduism also view karma as far more action rather than intentionality, and so there may be some confusion on that aspect. But so karma from like a cosmological sense operates as kind of like a law of the universe. I compare it very much to like something like gravity, like a fundamental law of the universe. And so not all karma is intrinsically bad karma. The goal of Buddhism, unlike Jainism, is not to eradicate all karma. It is to eradicate negative karma that inhibits the relinquishment of suffering. So you can accrue positive karma via generosity, and that is not going to hold you back. Okay? So, you know, if you had attachment to the way that people treat you based on your generosity, you know, like a Mr. Beast situation where Mr. Beast makes a lot of money and a lot of acclaim off of his, in quotations, generosity, that's a complicated situation where now we're getting into like the action may be good, but what is the intention there? Is it really benefiting other people? Is it just benefiting you? Is it a bit muddled? Is it complicated? Shit's advanced. And you say we graduate and move on to the next life. The goal is to graduate not onto the next life, to exit the system. We are trapped within the cycle. The goal is to fully exit the cycle in Buddhism. In something like in a lot of non-dualist Hinduism, there is the idea that you accrue enough positive karma to sort of become one again with the grander total, Brahman or Atman. You know, you become one with it. And so in that sense, it's not really a next life, it's kind of just one with everything. It's a very niche distinction. Any commentary from those in the call?
So like, I mean, you kind of answered it a little bit at the end of what you were saying there, but like, what is exiting the cycle? Is it just like what are the theories on that? Is it just indescribable to like mortal mind, or like what does that look like?
So, yes, yesterday we were talking about that book on Tantra. Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of what that teaches is like you're thinking of it the wrong way. You can't look at it. Looking at it is a form of perception, and perception is a form of attachment. So yeah, in a way, it is indescribable. It's kind of like a lot of the descriptions of Taoism, to where if you can describe the Tao, it's not the Tao. Maybe I can pull up that quote for you. I always forget that Google is terrible when I try to search for things, and I'm just getting AI bullshit. There's basically a passage earlier on in the Tao Te Ching, which is the like main central fundamental text behind the Taoist belief. And Taoism and Mahayana Buddhism synergize in many ways, where they share a lot of the same concepts, and ironically arose at a very similar time despite not having direct contact. And so it's the idea that like if you can describe it in words, it's not the true Tao. It is indescribable. And so much like that, the state of nirvana is extinguishment. Extinguishing what? Craving, sensation, all things. So you say, what does that look like to be without, to be enlightened? You would not know. You can only describe sort of like tangential things surrounding it, but the effort in and of itself to try to describe it is a form of clinging to the need for answers.
Yeah, there's a lot of peace being okay with not knowing the answer to things.
It's one of those like you really don't have a choice. You know, it's a tricky situation, and it can be unsatisfying, but much like the three fetters of existence, unsatisfactoriness is fundamental.
Well, do you think that's like what cones are trying to do? Like, because they all seem very paradoxical.
Koans, the Zen Buddhist thing,
Yeah.
those are designed to literally just break your ability to perceive anything in rational. You know, it is intentionally meant to be fundamentally, the irrationality is meant to be a juxtaposition for the desperate desire to understand things. And so it's kind of meant to, like, fuck with you. They're literally meant to fuck with you, and that's how you gain further insight into it. There's a reason why that school of thought is contentious. There are a lot of people who have gained a lot of insight from it, but there are just as many who have been alienated from that process. It's meant to be a very... It's a complicated school of thought. We'll leave it at that. There's a very common... one of the most iconic koans is... I forget exactly how it goes, but one a student asks a teacher, do dogs have souls? And the teacher responds with the word in Chinese and Japanese mu, as in like null, void, zero, no. And anybody who has any understanding of Buddhist cosmology will know that like that they do, though, you know, like they do engage in rebirth. That is part of the process. And so the whole illustration of this koan is meant to be like, it doesn't matter. Stop asking these dumb questions. Yeah, it's one of those, I wish I could provide you with a better answer, but the unsatisfactory nature of it is the point. Do you have any others before we proceed?
Nope.
Okay.
I think.
No, not mine.
All right, this is definitely a longer chapter, and we're going long. All right, let's see, somebody in the chat. I like the koan about the man hanging from a tree, indecision. Ooh, it's been a while since I've seen that one. I will look it up for the purpose of this. All right, so this is the passage. Oh, no worry about the intro. The whole point of a Dharma talk is this isn't a sermon. This is a discourse. This is a conversation. If you said it, if it's relevant, it is acceptable. That's how it goes. All right, Zen Master Kyogen said, "Let us suppose a man climbs up a tree. He grips the branches with his teeth. His hands do not hold on to the tree, and his feet do not touch the ground. A monk below asks him about the meaning of our founder coming from the west. If he does not answer, he will be avoiding the monk's question. But if he opens his mouth and utters a word, he will fall to his death. Under such circumstances, what should the man do?" A certain monk by the name of Koto said, "Once the man is up the tree, no question should be raised. The man should ask the monk if the latter has anything to say to him before he goes up the tree." Once hearing this, Kyogen laughed out loud. Later, Master Setcho commented, "It is easy to say it up the tree. To say it under the tree is difficult. So I shall climb the tree myself. Come ask me a question." Yeah, that one is, yeah. Wow, okay. So many of them are like that. Where this one... What a lot of people don't know is I'm trying to remember what the specific... I struggle with names so much lately. The branch that practices koans a lot, they also hit you. You know, like that. It is genuinely common in Japanese Zen, like, theological groups, be it like a monastery or a school. They're typically just called there. It's not as formal as a lot of others. You'll be like reciting or reading koans, and then like a teacher will just like randomly hit you with a wooden stick, and it's meant to like jar, like completely shock your reality, to throw you off pace in hopes of a spontaneous enlightenment. Suffice to say, there have been a lot of allegations of harmful practices out of these particular communities. Yeah, I'm not sure if I would voluntarily join a group in which my teacher has the authority to at random hit me with a stick. But a lot of people get benefit from it. I've not had the experience. I can't speak on it fully, but I've seen some videos and the shit is whack. Alright, onward. We have to look deeply to see how we grow our food, so we can eat in ways that preserve our collective well-being, minimize our suffering and the suffering of other species, and allow the earth to continue to be a source of life for all of us. If, while we eat, we destroy living beings or the environment, we are eating the flesh of our own sons and daughters. We need to look deeply together and discuss how to eat, and what to resist. This will be the real Dharma discussion. Ooh. That's another one of those to where it's like... A commentary on a modern-day situation that is deeply disturbing is the weaponization of food, wealth, wellness, and health by the current administration and RFK Jr., where he is doing all of this bloviating and talking about how our food is poisoning us, but then he is bringing about the deregulation of a shit ton of industries in which people will be poisoned for profit. Here's one of those dark ones that was like mildly reported. Did you know because of the Doge cuts to the FDA has stopped testing all milk? They are understaffed.
Holy shit, that's awful.
Yeah. So expect listeria, expect different forms of other intense bacteria, expect contaminations with anything that could be like added to it, illness from the cows themselves. And now I'm lactose intolerant suddenly. Another one is lots of deregulation on like the fish industry. I hope you look forward to mercury poisoning again. When we have these crackpots who guise their actions in like without considering consequences, like the way that they do, it can be very damaging. So while a crackpot might get the impression, oh, well, if we have all these chemicals or all these things in our food, it's bad, it's not taking care of the wellness of ourselves. That's not what this is saying. It's saying we must be vigilant about what we're putting in. And yes, often we're not vigilant about many of these overprocessed foods, about many of these things. One of those big examples is cereal. The whole idea that cereal is part of a balanced breakfast is literally a PR campaign. It's all bullshit. It's just candy. It's all sugar lobbyists. Stuff is complicated. It is far more about that recognition than it is like bowing to the whims of like it has to be all natural or it has to be all processed. And we are in a time to where we need to be more vigilant now than ever. And one of the parts that frustrates me the most with the sort of naysayers to this particular community is they freak out about like, oh, you don't know what are in these products. You don't know what the stuff is specifically. And yes, that is true. That is a legitimate concern. However, you can say the same about most of the things we put in our body. It is unfortunately an act of faith of pretty much anything we consume. How do you know that something didn't slip through the cracks? You don't. Does that mean you should act with complete reckless abandon for what you do? No. It means you should be cautious, be skeptical, but you still must continue living. You can't be in like a constant pit of concern. But you should still be concerned to some extent. I'd really like to not have listeria in the near future. Thanks Elon Musk and RFK Jr. I appreciate it. I wonder if these fools are ever going to realize that a lot of this deregulation is going to impact their own health. Just because you're rich doesn't mean that your crazy ass fucking milk is not going to be contaminated. Side tangent aside. Oh. The second kind of nutriment is sense impressions. Our 6 sense organs, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, are in constant contact with sense objects. In these contacts become food for our consciousness. When we drive through a city, our eyes see many billboards, and these images enter our consciousness. When we pick up a magazine, the articles and advertisements are food for our consciousness. Advertisements that stimulate our craving for possession, sex, food can be toxic. If after reading the newspaper, hearing the news, or being in a conversation we feel anxious or worn out, we know we have been in contact with toxins. Movies are food for our eyes, ears, and minds. When we watch TV, the program is our food. Children who spend 5 hours a day watching television are ingesting images that water the negative seeds of craving, fear, anger, and violence in them. We are posed to so many forms, colors, sounds, smells, tastes, objects of touch, and ideas that are toxic and rob our body and consciousness of their well-being. When you feel despair, fear, or depression, it may be because you have ingested too many toxins through your sense impressions. Not only children need to be protected from violent and unwholesome films, TV programs, books, magazines, and games, we too can be destroyed by these media. So this is also one of those, like, I fundamentally agree with the concept that Thich Nhat Hanh is suggesting, but I do also think that he too is subject to a sort of generational misunderstanding. He's still a person. He still can kind of be in that like boomer kids these days way. But the fundamentals are true. It does have impacts on us. The question is, how much is it impacting us, and is it worth the change? Who's to say? The important part, again, is being aware of it, being vigilant of it. These things do affect us. We are all simply composites of the things we bring in. I feel like another aspect is like I read that and I get concern because of my own fear, my own sort of attachment to my distrust of this type of rhetoric from like 1990s like satanic panic nonsense, where a lot of this attitude was in a way that was disingenuous. It was not legitimate. So it's like both can be true. These influences can be potentially harmful, but many of the people spouting these concerns, these just asking questions people, may also not be acting in good faith. We must be vigilant of this as well. If we are mindful, we will know whether we are ingesting the toxins of fear, hatred, and violence, or eating foods that encourage understanding, compassion, and determination to help others. With the practice of mindfulness, we will know that hearing this, looking at that, or touching this, we feel light and peaceful, while hearing that, looking at this, or touching that, we feel anxious, sad, or depressed. As a result, we will know what to be in contact with and what to avoid. Our skin protects us from bacteria. Antibodies protect us from internal invaders. We have to use equivalent aspects of our consciousness to protect us from unwholesome sense objects that can poison us. The Buddha offered this drastic image. There is a cow with such a terrible skin disease that her skin is almost no longer there. When we bring her close to an ancient wall or old tree, all the living creatures in the bark in the tree come out and cling to the cow's body and such. When we bring her into the water, the same thing happens. Even when she is just exposed to the air, tiny insects come and suck. Then the Buddha said, this is our situation also. We are exposed to invasions of all kinds. Images, sounds, smells, touch, ideas, and many of these feed the craving, violence, fear, and despair in us. The Buddha advised us to post a sentinel, namely mindfulness, at each of our sense doors to protect ourselves. Use your Buddha eyes to look at each nutriment you are about to ingest. If you see that it is toxic, refuse to look at it. Listen to it, taste it, or touch it. Ingest only what you are certain is safe. The 5 mindfulness trainings can help very much. We must come together as individuals, families, cities, and nation to discuss strategies of self-protection and survival. To get out of the dangerous situation we're in, the practice of mindfulness has to be collective. So as I said at the onset of this guided reading, there are some things that I will definitely disagree with Thich Nhat Hanh on about this one. He talks about how there are things that you can be certain are safe. That I am not confident. I believe that attachment to certainty in and of itself is something holding you back. It is having a skeptical cautiousness about the ways that things can affect you from a mindfulness perspective that I believe is more important. However, there is a chance that he too is just using certain as a sort of turn of phrase. You know, it's hard to say what his specific implications of that are. But I do agree with this core assessment. Mindfulness is the tool by which we can actually prepare ourselves for what we're intaking into our bodies. Does anybody have any commentary on this section of the passage so far?
Yo, iPad children are screwed.
Yeah, I work in disability services, primarily with children and young adults with mostly attention deficit disorders, autism spectrum disorder, and some behavioral issues. And the iPad generation, I feel like, is at this horrible crossroads with that situation that has led to a really, really not ideal situation. It is bad. And the thing is, it's not that there is anything intrinsically uniquely bad about the tablet or like the access to the internet for a child. It is the fact that it is access that is not being done from a mindful perspective. It is being used as a replacement for taking care of your own child. Right, so it is from a disregard for what is being put into your own child's mind that results in them getting in pretty suboptimal situations. One of my former clients is 7 years old, and he was like trying to show me his collections of pictures that he took from YouTube videos discussing SCP stuff. A 7-year-old. Do you know what SCP is?
Oh, I really like SCP, but
for a 7-year-old, yeah. Holy fuck, yeah. Like, and I'm like having to explain to him, like, look, dude, like this is fiction, and like this, the distinction between fiction and reality is like so hard to grasp for so many people, especially in the modern age. It's not even the iPad, that's just an electric book of knowledge, but the brain melting shit they feed children like Skippy Toilet is killing brain cells by the million. Yeah, it really is, where it's like, it is an entertainment that is aimless. It is there just to occupy space. That is what's insidious. It's not developing, in a sense, it is unskillful. It's not developing any skills. It's just distracting.
The thing that freaks me out is Coco Melon. Like,
oh,
have you seen the psychology behind that, man? Like, they crank up the color saturation and pan through it, like, the camera perspective as fast as possible to just, like, suck your attention span.
Yeah, there's YouTube Kids, I think, may genuinely be, like, one of the worst things to happen to society. Fucking Christ. The amount of money that, like... And what a lot of people don't know is most YouTube Kids content, still to this day, is content mills primarily from Southeast Asia, Russia, North Korea. Yes, North Korea, where they are mass churning out a mixture of AI and procedurally generated information all together into a slurry, and then dumping it out in such a volume that each individual post may not accrue much, but collectively it's generating insane amounts of income. And it's all cynical. Like, it's extremely cynical, it's extremely disturbing, and big tech is not equipped to take care of it. And we have parents in a generation that is in... The issue is capitalism. We're back down to, like, the core issue is capitalism. If parents were not so strapped day to day with paycheck to paycheck living, where they cannot take care of their own fucking kids, that they have to, like, iPad raise their kids, and if there wasn't a monetary incentive for churned out slop content on YouTube, we wouldn't be here. But no, it's all just a cynical cycle. It all goes back down to the rampant desire, the greed. I am very concerned for the well-being of the future. But it's one of those, like, we have access to as much positive information now as we do negative. It is a matter of what we choose to do with this information. And unfortunately, at the moment, we're not doing a lot of good stuff with it. There's a lot that can be worked on in that department. All right. The third kind of nutriment is volition, intention, or will. The desire in us to obtain whatever it is we want. Volition is the ground for all our actions. If we think that the way for us to be happy is to become president of a large corporation, everything we do or say will be directed towards realizing that goal. Even when we sleep, our consciousness will continue to work on it. Or suppose we believe that all our suffering and the suffering of our family has been brought about by somebody who has wronged us in the past. We believe we will only be happy if we inflict harm on that person. Our life is motivated solely by the desire for revenge, and everything we say, everything we plan, is to punish that person. At night we dream of revenge, and we think this will liberate us from our anger and hatred. Everyone wants to be happy, and there is a strong energy in us pushing us towards what we think will make us happy. But we may suffer a lot because of this. We need the insight that position, revenge, wealth, fame, or possessions are, more often than not, obstacles to our happiness. We need to cultivate the wish to be free of these things so we can enjoy the wonders of life that are always available. The blue sky, the trees, our beautiful children. After 3 months or 6 months of mindful sitting, mindful walking, and mindful looking, a deep vision of reality arises in us, and the capacity of being there, enjoying life in the present moment, liberates us from all impulses and brings us real happiness. So this gets into another really, really complicated aspect to the situation with Buddhist pacifism, where often I feel like Buddhist monastics fail to recognize the shifting tides of things, to where the way of control these days is so much more intense than I feel like it was during the cultivation of a lot of these texts, to where I fundamentally believe a few years back, I came up with my own sort of parable to kind of reflect on this. A lot of people will kind of give the metaphor that life is like sailing a ship, okay? where it's like you have control over your own vessel. You are guiding it along. But I came to the understanding that, like, yes, you may have a lot of control over your own vessel in this lifetime, but should the waters be tumultuous, should you be being attacked by another vessel, should things be occurring in that way, your crew can be perfect. You could have your entire organization down completely. But if there are enough external obstacles getting in the way, something has to give. Sure, on a grand scheme of Buddhist cosmology, you can make the argument that, like, yes, these two are temporary, these two are impermanent. But I believe that it is still worthy of preventing those who wish upon us suffering can be dealt with in a way that does not implicate ourselves significantly in a worse state. I would be very hard-pressed to find that Thich Nhat Hanh would believe that allowing the Americans to conquer Vietnam would be preferable than the Vietnamese themselves fighting back against their oppressors. Finding that balance where you can do it appropriately is where it gets complicated. But I'm not yet at the point where I believe that we should forego resisting these people who their aim is to inflict suffering. We did not bring about this fight. They did. I'd be happy to allow them to reconcile, to make amends, but I didn't bring this upon myself. I didn't bring this upon other people. There are people that are inflicting suffering knowingly or unknowingly, or at least, looking away from the suffering they're inflicting, and that is a problem. And we are getting to the point to where so much power is being isolated in so few people that all of life known on Earth, sure, be it temporary as it may, could be brought about to an end due to the wanton disregard for respect for other people. But it is also true on the same note. I know a really unhappy person. Elon Musk. Very powerful man. Very miserable man. He has so much. He has so many things. He's done so much harm to so many people, and yet he, too, does not have peace of mind. He's miserable. It's obvious to anybody who's interacted with him. It is a clawing, a desperation on his part. This daddy issues. Homie's got daddy issues. Genuinely, like, he has such a desire for affirmation, and he's so willing to allow other people to be harmed for that. And I believe that we can still operate from a Buddhist path without allowing others to completely crush us underfoot. The difference is we just cannot allow ourselves to stoop to their level on things. That's a core aspect. And be mindful that, yes, this desire to fight back on them is indeed a desire, but as I said before, sometimes you must pick your battles of attachment. I don't think the needless suffering of millions is worthy of the perpetuation and allowing of a small few to continue to go about engaging in that suffering forced upon others. That is my belief. Any commentary from anybody else? I see one. All right, in the chat. This was on the previous subject. It's also that the parents not paying attention. I was a YouTube kid, kind of, but I spent time looking up DIYs on stuff. Well, the government probably wouldn't approve, but yes, I've seen a huge change of content in the years. What's scary is the difference between our and China's algorithm. Yeah, there is certainly a sort of... There's a new dilemma there with the disconnect between the two sort of perspectives on things. China operates under a far more paternalistic attitude. Be it whether you agree with it or not, they're certainly more controlling of the sort of things that are allowed into their into the minds of their populace. Some more insidious than others. One day after the Buddha and a group of monks finished eating lunch mindfully together, a farmer, very agitated, came by and asked, "Monks, have you seen my cows? I don't think I can survive so much misfortune." The Buddha asked him what happened, And the man said, "Monks, this morning all 12 of my cows ran away, and this year my whole crop of sesame plants was eaten by insects." The Buddha says, "Sir, we have not seen your cows. Perhaps they have gone in the other direction." After the farmer went off in that direction, the Buddha turned to his Sangha and said, "Dear friends, do you know you are the happiest people on earth? You have no cows or sesame plants to lose." We always try to accumulate more and more and we think these cows are essential for our existence. In fact, they may be the obstacles that prevent us from being happy. Release your cows and become a free person. Release your cows so you can be truly happy. Again, this is a really tricky one where I kind of come up against, I come at odds with Thich Nhat Hanh in this one. One of the core criticisms that a lot of Buddhist lay people have for the monastic groups is that they you know, real easy for you to say from your ivory tower, you know, where you are receiving money via donations. You know, somebody's got to get that food. You're not just, you know, photosynthesizing out here. You can certainly do it in a more respectful way, you know, respectful with the community, respectful with nature, but like at some point the rubber meets the road. The Buddha presented another drastic image. 2 strong men are dragging a third man along in order to throw him into a fire pit. He cannot resist, and finally they throw him into the glowing embers. These strong men, the Buddha said, are our own volition. We don't want to suffer, but our deep-seated habit energies drag us into the fire of our suffering. The Buddha advised us to look deeply into the nature of our volition to see whether it is pushing us in the direction of liberation, peace, and compassion, or in the direction of suffering and unhappiness. We need to be able to see the kinds of intention food that we are consuming. The food of consciousness is the fourth of the 4 kinds of food. There are 2 kinds of consciousness, the collective and the individual. The food of consciousness means that we consume consciousness. There are different kinds of consciousness food. Some are healthy and nutritive, and some are toxic. If the collective consciousness, there are many toxic foods such as anger and despair. If we allow ourselves to consume that kind of food, we shall be poisoned. So we should not spend time close to or in a community that has a great deal of hatred and despair. We need to find a collective consciousness to be with that is not filled with hatred and despair, where all day long the people who live there just think about compassion and helping others. Yeah, and I would apply that towards a broader sort of society. Yeah, this definitely sort of gets into like, you know, anarcho-syndicalism territory here. But it's like, it's really hard to just like, oh, go have your little community. Really easy for that to happen when ICE is here to come into your homes without a warrant. You know, like, it's tricky striking that balance. Sometimes people just really cannot leave you alone. At some point, you have to stand your ground or you just forfeit your existence. If you're prepared to forfeit that unto the next life, so be it. That is your choice to make. I'm not confident that that is a choice I'm willing to make at this stage. The individual consciousness also has toxins. The hells, hungry ghost, and animal realms are in us. If we want them to appear, they can appear right away. We only need to press a button and Pandora's box will open. If we sit there and allow negative thinking connected to past experiences to come up, we are eating the toxic matter of consciousness. Many of us sit and think, and the more we think, the more angry, upset, and in despair we become. Yeah, that I do agree on. It's one of those, like, I'm in this very particular dynamic where my only real claim to expertise that I can even make is in the political space. And the political environment right now is so extremely toxic that it is truly like taking a lot out of me. And so it's this horrible sort of, it's this catch-22 to where it's like you simultaneously need to take time away to process and not be exposed to so much negative energy. But by you know, withdrawing, you risk being caught lacking effectively. Like there's now talk of like, oh, we need to have another constitutional convention. But like as in to like make the Constitution worse. like, if you don't know about these things, how can you contact your representatives? How can you ward off the potential risk to your life being significantly harmed? How do you go about that? Finding that balance can be so challenging in this day and age. Nevertheless, in our consciousness, besides the seeds of the gods, the Asuras, the hell realms, the hungry ghosts, the animals, and the seeds of hero disciples, self-achieved Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and fully enlightened Buddhas, we have as many channels in our consciousness as a 10-channel television. Why do we not push the button of the Buddha or Bodhisattva channel? Sitting alone, we push on the hungry ghost or animal channel and eat the food they produce, just like the ruminants chew the cud. In the past, we have experienced hatred. We have been abused and maltreated. All these events have been buried in our consciousness, and we have not been able to transform them. We chew the cud of our suffering, our despair, like the cow chews the regurgitated grass. Every time we think about being abused, we are abused once again. But actually, that is not happening now. It is all over. Thinking like this, we can be abused every day. Even though our childhood may have had a great deal of happiness and sweet moments, we ruminate on our hatred, our suffering, our despair, and it is not healthy food. This is another really one of those tricky ones to where it's like, I think both can be true, that we must be vigilant as to not sort of like... A lot of people who will hear that will sort of, balk at the idea of like... trying to think of how to phrase this one. In a lot of recovery groups or in a lot of situations where we discuss abuse, there is a deep sensitivity that can in some ways be to the detriment of one's own growth, whereby ruminating on said abuse, it can indeed be very harmful. But on the same foot, just saying, oh, get over it, is not especially helpful either. Once again, it is finding that middle way where we must recognize that if we continue to ruminate on these things that have harmed us, it continues to harm us. But at the same point, if we ignore it, if we try to look past it, if we're not aware of it in a meaningful way, that too is a form of harm. It is its own form of suffering.